Mathew is a scholar and also sort of in the academic space, to give us sort of his view of what he thinks, coming from what Laura is mentioning about creating the space to decolonize, but at the same time providing that, using the privilege of researchers and different actors to infiltrate the space of incumbency and challenging the same. Mathew, in your experience and looking at taking a context of academia, how is this practical? How can we work towards this? And how has your work contributed towards this?
Thank you, Joel, for that question and inviting me to be part of this panel discussion today. I think I'm really excited about it. But unlike others, I like to start by saying that I'm very conflicted to engage with this topic. I'm very conflicted for several reasons. And one, for the fact that perhaps I might, in my line of research and engaging in community development activities, may be a representative of power. And starting from that point, I would like to ask myself, where do I stand? And when we talk about decolonizing methodology, where do we start from? And who is doing the decolonizing? And who are we targeting? So for me, I think it's an issue of reflexivity and positioning myself in this kind of conversation. In looking at power, power is part of us. It just depends who has it and what the person would use it for. Because in every relationship, as far as there are people who are interacting, one is meant to have power over the other. What do we use that kind of power for? And when it comes to research, by the mere fact that a particular person has designed the research and going to engage with research participants to engage or to gather data or whatever it is, in itself is a power relationship. So I guess that would be my starting point. And that is a conflict that I'm trying to grasp my head around. That as I represent power in people I engage with, and I would, in my course of conversation, would bring some personal reflections to actually demonstrate where I have been confronted as a researcher with a particular form of power. Last year, I went for a conference, and in my course of presenting my paper, an audience raised their hand and asked me a question. You are from an ivory tower, you are from the university. In the eyes of the community, you are representing, you are a colonial instrument. You are the power that they don't want to see. How do you navigate that when you engage with them in the field? So the same year, I was conducting a research among African Australian men in Australia. And I went with the director of the program, who was white, and I was Black, and the people that we were interacting with were all Black. When we got there were a lot of educated people, and they were all, at least everybody had a first degree. They wouldn't talk. Everybody just didn't want to talk to us. And we did everything we could to make them talk. And one of the questions they asked us, what do you want from us? What do you want from us? We were struggling to answer this question. And they said, not you, but we are talking to your boss. What do you want from us? Year in, year out, you come to us and you take data. What do you do with that data? We want to know from you. That was us being confronted by research participants who knew the power that they had. So I guess the point I'm making is that power is not static and it's fluid. And both the researcher and the people that they are engaging with could actually have power, and that power can be fluid and move around. So I guess in finding myself in these spaces, especially from a research point of view and practitioner point of view, and being questioned by research participants about the power that I have, and being questioned by conference participants pointing to the fact that I have a particular power, is where my conflict comes from. And I'm really struggling to wrap my head around that. I have to say that I like to also say that the issue of power and research and decolonizing, I've heard my previous panelists talk about marginal voices. Who are these marginal voices? Is it people from the global south who produce a particular form of knowledge? Are they the marginal voices, or the people that we engage with to get that knowledge from? I like to see this way, that if it is about the voices of people that we engage with, I don't think we are in luck, because there've been a lot of theories, a lot of knowledge that has been produced from engaging with people from the global south, especially from Africa, which is often seen as a testing ground for a lot of exploratory researches. So for me, if that's where we are starting from, then I think a lot of people have already captured those voices in academia and community practice. If it is about individuals from the marginal, from the global south who become the marginal voices, I like to rephrase the question this way. Within the framework of knowledge that they create, what is the methodology that they use? And are they perpetuating the colonial knowledge construction? And if that is the point, are they marginal voices? If their form of knowledge is produced within the same framework that we are questioning today. So where do we start from? I guess that is the next question I want to raise. And I'm keen to hear what my colleagues would say and where the emphasis should be. The third point I want to make is, are we not late in having this conversation now? And trying to explain this conversation now, is it about adding our voice to explain the problem that we already know, or it's about finding an alternative way of creating knowledge and questioning the power that we have as people who engage in research and use a particular form of methodologies? I ask this question because earlier academics, as early as 1960s, had this conversation, and some have even written about it. If you look at Ngugi wa Thiong'o's book, Decolonizing the Mind, I think it's the same discourse that he was talking about in the 1960s and 70s. And if we are having the same conversation today, are we dancing around the point, or we are actually making some form of inroad towards something that we can actually change? Or is this just an academic fantasy that we just like to have a conversation about it? So I think that is another thing that I'm actually struggling to understand, whether we are too late, whether we are dancing around a point, or we should be talking about what concretely we can do to actually decolonize methodology, especially when it comes to knowledge creation and how that particular knowledge is consumed. I know it's a conversation, and we are all just kickstarting, and there will be opportunity for us to highlight more things. Within the framework that all of us are even speaking today, we are using a particular form of language. Our way of reasoning is patterned in a particular way, but the mere fact that we have been right from nursery, right from primary school to today, particular way of knowledge that we have consumed is produced using a particular form of methodology. And by the mere fact that we have consumed that, it means we have installed that kind of software in our minds. How do we disentangle that? And are we calling for the overhaul of our educational system? And how do we do that? So I think these are basic reflections that I will start. And there are more things to talk about. And I think I'll be ready and keen to engage your audience and my fellow participants or panelists. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. I mean, bringing that question of what are we actually concretely doing, and without excuses to be able to challenge the dominant. I think that's actually a very good place to bridge into who we are going to hear from next. So